John, I'm going to start with you. And tell me, we just talked about the 5 tips for training for change. Why don't you tell me about why you're passionate about preparing for change?
Yeah, in our business, we're in the M&A business. So selling businesses is difficult. It's complex. It's stressful and particularly emotional for the seller. I get the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs, business owners, families through the sale of their business, which is really the ultimate change. So we work as a change agent with those companies, helping those owners embrace change prior to the sale of the business and through the actual process itself. So everybody here, I think, understands that selling a business to a private equity firm or a larger strategic buyer will cause a lot of chaos. But what I think what we're talking about today is the challenge of being prepared well ahead of time. Do you have the right finance and accounting infrastructure in place? Do you measure the things that a buyer or that tells you how your business is performing? Do you have the right team that can withstand these kinds of changes and actually, really grow during the process? So I think that's why I'm passionate about change.
Oh, good. Kind of on that whole topic of the complexity and the stressfulness of change, Jamie, why don't you tell me, is there any change that's currently going on in your company? You're smiling like, duh, right? Yeah.
There is. So for those of you that follow education, there's a significant transformation happening in education. So Questar is an educational assessment company. We focus on providing assessments for both districts and states around the country, and we're very tied to the political landscape. So depending on what's going on at a state and a federal level, that directly impacts our business. So we've got a tremendous amount of change occurring both because of the political climate, with a lot of new initiatives that are being introduced in education. But in addition to that, education is really the last frontier. It is the kind of the last place where we're seeing a print to digital shift. So as a business that's been around for 40 plus years, a lot of our products were print-based. And in the last 5 years, we've had to make a fairly significant transformation to more of a software as a service business model. So on top of the market factors, and then as well as the print to digital shift, and all of the political turmoil going on in education, we have to find ways to constantly be changing and reinventing our skill set to continue the work that we do. So a lot of change.
Yeah. So Jeff, we talked a little bit about business, but you and I have kind of talked about the bleed over from personal change and your business change. So how do you, as a leader of a company, prepare yourself for change so that you can help your company?
Well, a couple things. We have a wellness initiative, so I have to keep the things that I said I was going to do in January throughout the rest of the year because people are watching as a guy actually doing the workouts. So personally, number one, you have to keep your energy up. That allows you, quite frankly, to be thinking around what's around the corner. So I try to spend time. We have a great independent board. What's going on in their business? Business network. What's going on around different areas. Why would the oil pricing really affect us? What does the political turmoil affect us? So we spend some time thinking about that as an executive team. And one of the things that we push on, we have 8 folks on our executive team. We meet every day. We also spend some time, at least 2 or 3 times a year, just thinking about the what-if scenarios with ourselves and our extended teams. So preparing for change is kind of think about it. And how do you get out there and try to think what's going on competitively, what's going on in the financial markets, what's going on within our industry, which has been slow growth. We serve the food service industry, really hasn't grown since 2008, yet we're gaining share. So how do we gain more share? And what are the dynamics that'll change in that, both in our favor and without it, and then what do we do about it?
Yeah. So there's the preparing for change, which, we'd all love to believe that our businesses were all prepared for everything that's coming down the pike. But Jamie, we've kind of talked about sometimes there are things that pop up, right? And you kind of end up in a panic mode. How do you deal with that change that you didn't anticipate?
That's funny. I've got some of my executive team here in the back, and we were just dealing with one of these issues less than 12 hours ago, so this is near and dear to my heart.
So I'm going to watch to see that they're doing
Yeah,
this.
Everyone
when you're-
shake their
okay.
heads, yes.
Right.
So, you know, I think as executives, the number one thing you have to do is, and I heard Ann say this earlier, and it's important, you set the pace and you set the tone. So the first thing you have to do is step back, get the noise out of the way in terms of what the urgent issue is, and think about it for a few minutes. How do we react to this? What is the real issue? And what are the possible solutions? Then what I always do is engage my team. My executive team, as a collaborative group, we're gonna make better decisions than any one of us would alone. So stepping back, thinking about it for a few minutes, instead of running around the organization like a big fire drill. Work through what the options are and then engage your team. So with employees, and we talked about this early as well as Ann was walking us through the 5 steps, employees are your business, and if you think otherwise, you're wrong. So how you react to an issue, how you set the tone, and then the way you rally the troops around how to overcome the issue or achieve the objective is absolutely critical. And there's always going to be urgent issues that pop up in any business all the time. It's how the executives react to them, the way you work through them as a team, and then the way you engage your employees to help you solve issues, I think is the most important way.
Yeah, so I'm going to check with the team back there.
They're
I'm
back
getting
in the
a
corner.
nod.
You guys can
Okay.
wave.
All
We've
right,
got
good.
CFO and CTO.
Good, I got
yeah.
some nods up here too. So, Jeff, do you want to add
We
to
spend a
that?
lot of time
Yeah.
preparing for change. I'm going to go back to Ann's theme, and we do it a couple different ways. One, strategic planning. Most of us all do that. We also go through the exercise where we look at our talent and say, okay, who's ready for the next move? You know, if something happened, you know, what would we do for that? And it's almost, I'll call that like static people planning. But I think that the thing that we do very well is we think with the strategic plan, we think what are the core competencies and skills that'll enable us to be the RTI that we want to be, you know, 2-3 years down the road. And then we work backwards and say, do we have those skills within our organization, and how do we prepare them? Or do we say, okay, we don't have those skills, we need to go outside and start to create the foundation and the platform so we'll be able to be successful in the future. So that's one I'd highly encourage you to do, and that one's tough. That one takes more noodling and hardcore thinking and analysis and self-reflection than, quite frankly, the strategic planning is.
Yeah, and John, you know, as I was listening, I was thinking about the work that you do, and if that's the hard work, like how do you help organizations? Why is it important that you prepare organizations for change, and how do you get through that hurdle that he was just talking about? That, man, we got to sit down and really do this work.
Yeah, when Ann was talking, you know, one of the things that resonated with me, and I suppose that's a little self-serving since I'm an outsider, but is leveraging outside resources to facilitate change. Because I know, like when I had my manufacturing business, you know, I was in there every day, and it was really difficult to pull back and really look at what's happening around me. And you know, it doesn't have to be a consultant, and it doesn't have to be, you know, this even a paid resource. It could be somebody that has experienced what you've experienced in your industry, and can understand. You know, it could be somebody that's gone through a sale process or a successful business person that would be willing to mentor you and leverage that person to identify the things that really need to be done and the holes. And when we get involved, you know, we know the questions that are coming down the pike from the buyers or from these outside diligence people. And so the more that we can do early on to prepare for those questions and those things that are going to happen, it makes a big difference. Like I've seen it make millions of dollars of differences in transactions. If you can get through diligence and get through these big changes successfully.
Yeah. So we've got this really cool technology. You all have submitted questions, and I got them rolling up here on the iPad. And so these are, I'm going to throw this out to the three of you and see which one of you wants to answer the, you know, what if, I have a question that says, I'm in an industry right now in which, you know, historically we haven't had to change. But it's coming, and we're going to have to do it. Any tips for what I need to be thinking about?
I would go hardcore scenario planning,
Yeah.
from the most positive to the most negative. And amongst those scenarios, I would walk backward and say, is this team the ones I need? And chances are you're going to get, it's just food for thought. And then as you really start to dig in and see some leading indicators that say, hey, between the best and the worst scenario, where's this thing starting to fall through? Then I'd start taking some small steps. Because when something does happen bigger, you need to have some practice out there as well as some expertise.
I think just to add
Yeah.
to that, especially for your executive team, there will be core positions or skill sets that you absolutely have to start that process of change. And in those roles, I think you have to move pretty fast and have no fear, so to speak. So once you know what you need and the direction that you think you're going to have to go, depending on the scenarios, making sure that you've got those key roles in place to really help facilitate the process of changing, because getting the rest of the organization to move with you at a pace that you may or may not need is very difficult if you don't have a key set of folks that are helping you lead that change.
So
And
talk.
I jump in one other part,
Okay.
mechanically, you got to sit there and say what parts of the business fundamentally are not going to be there anymore. Or if what functions, quite frankly, could be best outsourced. And that'll enable you to fund the change that you see coming.
Yep. So I think that, and we're in Minnesota, and I've heard this thing about Minnesota nice. Anybody heard of that? So there's a question about how do you keep the organization positive, and I think the underlying question is that, what do you do with the naysayers as you're moving through a change?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I feel like the naysayers are, oftentimes in a culture, if you have too many naysayers, we all know what that indicates, right? I mean, it's just, it's a leadership problem, and the naysayers can just really be a fundamental problem to progress in a company. So, it all starts at the top. It starts with the leader. It's embracing change, laying out a credible plan, and being prepared. Those things are really important.
I think the one thing I would add to that is oftentimes, and we're living through this right now with the transformation we're going through at Questar, is oftentimes your naysayers have really important ideas or are thinking about something that you're not thinking about, because once you get your plan in place as an executive team, you just want to go. And so what I try to do and what our team tries to do is really engage with those people. And there is a line where once you've got them to a point where you understand what their issues are, they understand the direction that you have to go, there will come a point where it's just not the right place for them anymore, and then just move them on. But make sure sometimes those types of situations come out of somebody maybe feeling like they haven't been heard, or they have an idea that you as a company haven't thought about, and they just don't know how to bring it up other than being negative. So engaging with them, figuring out what the root issue is, coaching them for the future, and if they can't make that transition, get them out fast, because they'll pull the rest of the organization down.
That's a great point. And having that discipline to listen is that's a tough one. But I would say the things you have to work, when you see the negative stuff, one of the things that I continue to worry about is complacency in our organization.
Yeah.
This is that subtle change that Ann was talking about. The naysayers really can drive complacency in an organization, and that's really where you listen to them. If there's something value, great. Otherwise, communicate clearly. Here's where we're going. Here's why the boat's taken off.
Yep.
You can stay on the dock.
Yeah. So I think to kind of go along with that whole, the exercise analogy that we've been using this morning, like a coach always is giving their athlete feedback, right, and listening. So I think that's another thing for us to kind of remember. Now, I'm sure that none of this has ever happened to you all, but maybe there was a time when, like, you didn't do such a good job managing a change. You'd like to share with the whole group of people that you don't know?
Let's see here.
I could start with one, and it's a perfect segue from the last question that we had. In a manufacturing company that I was running, we had the chief naysayer was our chief production guy, and I felt like through that we were growing rapidly, and I felt like his technical expertise was what we really needed to have in the company. And so for a year, I dealt with this guy, and really felt like, you walk into the plant and felt like this sort of pretty lousy atmosphere. And the whole rest of the company moved on beyond him, and then all of a sudden, I realized that, he really was a problem, and I fired him, and then the next day I walked into the plant, and it was just like the lights came on. I mean, it was just like it's amazing how a person like that can really bring an organization down.
Yeah.
I was too slow to react. That was yeah.
I think on the flip side of that, my experience is, as you build your career and you're managing a department and then a business unit and then you're CEO or managing a very large group, you tend to forget that not everyone can pace as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes you're setting a pace and people can't keep up. And so how do you check the temperature, and how do you make sure that what you're saying and what you're expecting out of people is actually realistic? And I've had many times, where I've had to reset myself and step back and say, okay, is what I'm asking them to do unrealistic? And how do I get the same outcome in a time frame that we need as a business, but maybe approach it a little bit differently? So really trying to appreciate different styles and the way that people go about getting things done, and not expecting that everybody can just keep up with me. And I think that's a hard thing to do when you can see so clearly down the road or around the corner what needs to happen and the time frame it needs to happen, and just getting there.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. So I'm sitting here going, all right, the one I moved too fast or the one I moved too slow? So I'll do the one I moved too slow, Lee. And that was because I'm cleaning it up right now, unfortunately. We run a very disciplined operations. We measure the heck out of everything to the thousandths of a penny. And long story short, we fell in love with the measurements rather than the result. And the leadership convinced everybody else of that area that, hey, you know what, we can't get there because these other measures. And it's so dang complicated. And then I went back and, after the person was no longer with us, went in and said, isn't it really about three things? And the organization went, yes. So now that, it is about three things, three key measures, and now, we've made great strides in 6 months, but I moved too slowly and let, the world become too complex for me to understand, let alone the whole organization. Yeah. So that was a leadership change. You always want to move a little slower than you'd want, but I moved too slow in that one.
So I'm glad you brought up data, because there's this, big data, right, is all the rage now. Got a big data t-shirt too to go along. Everyone will get one on the way out. Just kidding. But how is this use of data? I mean, I think, Jeff, that's a great example. How is this use of data influencing your change in your organization, positively or negatively?
After going through that, I've just, when I talk to folks within our company, I say data is all about driving behaviors that end up getting sustainable results. So if the data is out there and it's for an analysis, super. I want to talk about the data that's going to use it to change behavior, be a better leader, be a better outcome. So, to me, I'm trying to make it very simple. We've used some Six Sigma tools, et cetera, but it's really compressing it to one of the ones that really matter.
In our business, what we find is that buyers and people who are more industry experts have specific pieces of data that they want to understand about the acquisition target. And oftentimes we find that people are not measuring those things. They might be measuring some things. Oftentimes they're not. I mean, the whole data thing is not necessarily gotten down into family businesses. And I'm not talking about tiny businesses. I'm talking like $50, $75, $100 million a year revenue businesses that really don't measure much of anything. Just a quick example, we were working with the business ahead of a sale and going through kind of a budgeting process, looking forward into the future, and they put out this budget that they wanted to put in front of buyers, and we kind of dug in and realized that I went in and I took measurements and kind of laid out all of this knowing that the buyers would be looking at this stuff, and it turned out that the budget was absolutely a fabrication because in this case, like a book-to-bill ratio didn't support the growth projections that they had. So within 2 minutes, that management team would have been discredited because they put something out there that absolutely didn't match up with what's happening in their business. So, preparing for that ahead of time and making sure that there's a team in place that knows what's being measured and does it in advance is so important.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about the, kind of broadly about change. Do you have a specific example of where you've met resistance and you had to get a little innovative to figure out how to get folks to look at it at a different angle and you had a success? Jamie?
Sure.
You're shaking your head.
So we, over the last year at Questar, we've basically taken the company and turned it in 180 degrees. And I talked about that earlier, just the print to digital shift, operating more like a software as a service company versus a large print-based publisher. And we've had just the wonderful tenure in the organization of many folks who've been with us for 10, 15, 20 plus years. And trying to get an organization, hundreds of people, to understand that when moving to a digital-based assessment provider, as well as dealing with a lot of the market pressure that we've had to deal with, you're going to have to learn new skills. You're going to have to, even though we've had this great business process that has worked wonderfully for many, many, many years, it's not going to work anymore. And telling hundreds of people that, especially those that have been very, very successful in what they've done for many years, is extremely difficult. So the issue that we ran into is you can say it 100 times in 100 different ways, change, 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 change. But until you actually, from CEO all the way down to frontline managers, you have to dig into your business. And for the first 6 months, we had a strategic plan, setting the pace, setting the vision, the mission, all of those things. But to the average employee, they wake up and they go to their cubicle or wherever they work and they sit down and they don't know how to take the vision and the mission and all those things you're telling them to do and just change it. So for a lot of executives, it's almost a restart where you have to roll up your sleeves and you have to say, okay, let's take the biggest pieces of our business that have to change, and let's just start blocking and tackling the business process around it and making sure that we're living it with them. Because if you don't do that, and what we run into is we started to lose some good people because they couldn't take vision to practice. And so we very quickly had to sort of reset the way we were going about communicating this change, and what I would call, getting into the weeds a little bit more than you'd like to because you have so many other things that you have to do, but at least getting the new way of doing things established to a point where employees feel like now their ideas can really take off. So that would be, I think, a way to work through that.
So as a follow-up on that, so as you go from strategy to the, down to the line, like what are there specific behaviors that you're looking for? I mean, sometimes I find that if you can tie it to a behavior, right, the how you do it, do you have behaviors that you look for?
It's a very tactical explanation taken off from what Jamie was talking about. So, for us, we're a 24/7 business. We have to deliver cooking oil when our customers use it, which are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? Who likes to work Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Would you prefer to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? So we had a fundamental mismatch of what people wanted to do. And at one point, 3 years ago, we were aligned delivering the cooking oil when our customers need it. Slowly but surely, complacency set in. We started measuring the wrong things, looking at the wrong things. Next thing you know, everything's going out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. When you do that, it's all in overtime, and it's a real mismatch from customer needs, et cetera. So we did a little exercise with the general managers that make those decisions and said, all right, what's the optimal routing schedule? They did it in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And we had drifted all this. It cost us millions of dollars. And I said, okay, if we did that, what would happen? Well, guess what? Our customers would be happy. We'd be delivering things more efficiently. Our drivers would actually have more balance in their lives because we'd be taking out all the overtime. And we actually get more predictable. So then you go, okay, it's good for them, it's good for you, it's good for the company, it's good for our customer, and the reason we're not doing it is, boom, right? So we had drifted and we forgot, here's data that takes you to managing behavior that was a win-win-win. So that's an example.
I guess I could chime in a little bit here. On one hand, we had an experience last year where I was sitting with a business owner who was not really supporting the change or the things that we needed to do, and it took, this is costing you millions of dollars right now. And all of a sudden, wow, I got his attention. But that's not the time to do it, right? I mean, it's when it's costing somebody millions, it's not the time to embrace that change or to try to push it through the organization because everybody's already stressed, right? So it's those years in advance leading up to that change. And I guess I'll go back to this, sometimes it takes an executive or an owner to bring in somebody from the outside to really kind of make that plan and help see things in a different way. It's just that outside perspective can help. And I'll put in a little plug here, but I did that with Salo in the last year with a client, and I mean, things just changed when we had this consultant come in, and was there every day working with the team, and it was a dramatic change to the process. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm going to smile a little bit as I ask this question, because I think this is kind of this is a version of the bringing somebody from the outside. But what advice do you have for the younger professionals in the room who see the change, but there might be some more seasoned? That's a nice word. That's
Yeah.
a better one than I could get. Right? Yeah. The more seasoned folks who are like, oh, maybe we've been there, done that. What advice do you have for the younger professionals?
I'm pretty young, so I can share this from firsthand.
And the rest of us are old.
We're the old guys up
This
here.
is point counterpoint.
Yeah. Old guy. Okay.
There's a couple. So I'm on the younger side of typical CEOs, and one of the things I've done my whole career is, it goes back to the support your boss. So you're always going to have somebody who will see something differently than you, and so how do you prove your point? And it's not just having a conversation or thinking you're right. So data, examples, all of those things, building a solid business case for what you're trying to achieve, and then not backing down. Don't let anybody tell you, I don't care what business you're in, I don't care who you work for, people love to be surrounded by brilliant ideas and good, hardworking young executives. And if you do it in a way that's humble, approachable, and you're always making your business unit, your boss, your group look great, so it's for the better and the good of the business and your customers, people will listen to your ideas. What I find with a lot of younger folks that work for me is they have these great ideas, but they have a hard time backing it up with general business logic. So it's the passion for what we need to do for our customers and our business, and then it's the how we get it done and what's the benefit. What's the ROI? How does this change? How does this accomplish the problem that we're trying to address? So I think it's just really that passion, supporting what you're trying to do, making your boss look good, which is important as you're growing your career, and then backing it up with really good, solid business plans of how you accomplish it.
That's great advice. Just be patient with us older folks.
You're slow to come around.
And we're done.
I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm right in between it.
Anticipate the brawl, right, that was going to occur. No, it's really interesting, because I wish someone would have told me early on in my career that, numbers are the language of business, right? And as soon as I learned that, and you can connect your passion with the numbers, suddenly people listen. It's you just lost millions of dollars. Oh, right? All of a sudden you get their attention. So I think that's
Yeah, I think the key for me, what I heard from Jamie too, and what I've experienced is that I feel like when anybody in business, but it's approaching it as being supportive, encouraging, and making and not dragging other people down around you, but then being prepared. It's always like, if somebody walks in and they lay out something in front of me and they know the details, and they know what they're talking about because they spent all this time preparing. It's when they come in, it's when somebody comes in, conversely, and you can feel that there's holes in it, and it's more from just a passion standpoint that doesn't bode well. Right?
What I always have done is, especially if you're trying to work with your colleagues, to me it's harder to take your peer level and get them to change than it is to convince your boss if you've got a good solid plan, because your peers, everybody has their own things that they're focusing on, their own direction, what motivates them. So I would always go into those conversations with, what are the 20 things that my peer is going to come back on me with? Why not? All of the different things that motivate or demotivate them, I've got to think through all of those and have an answer for them. And that's the planning part of it that I think really helps you get people to start moving with change.
Good. So tell me, I think the fifth point that Ann had, the track improvement and measure results. How do you get that? We've talked a little bit about it. How do you take the organizational vision, and how do you get it aligned with the employee's vision? Right, because that's generally a delta. We were talking about earlier, it's just a bunch of messy human beings that you got working for you. So
We use a balanced scorecard.
So do we.
And it's very visible. Every department, every individual knows what bubble they impact. And we make sure that we work hard to tie in incentive compensation into that. We do things such as monthly lunches. Here's the financials. Here's what's going on this month. Can someone tell me what they did this week to affect this bubble? And we do it at all levels. We do it at our 41 depots, so we have hourly drivers and techs able to articulate that. So we work really hard to put our strategy into everyone's language so they can understand it and then link it to measurements.
I love the example that you used before about standing with those tech drivers and asking them. I mean, the CEO of the company traveling to see these people and.
Well, we
I
all
love
our
that.
executive team, we do roundtables when we're at the depot, and it's at their convenience, right? Some of them start at 6 in the morning, so you'll be there at 5 with donuts, or again, vice versa, late at night. And it is important to explain to them, okay, Jeff, what did you do to help the balanced scorecard today? Now, that's a good question. So I have to answer it. But then, having them, challenge the strategy. Hey, Jeff, in the real world, this is what occurs. Help me work through that. So that's why it's very important. Again, I would say that's planning for change. If we have that type of relationship, with all 800 employees, you'll have a high level of trust bank that you can count on when you say, hey, guys, you got to trust me, we got to go this way.
I think just to add to that, at Questar, we did not have a good process in place. I think you guys have just best in class in terms of how the scorecard and some of the things I've heard you talk about. I think part of it, if you're not doing it today, you're not really getting to the employee level and them one-to-one connecting with your strategy, your corporate objectives, how they affect that scorecard. Just start with, and we did this last year and now we're on to phase 2, is just make sure that you go from strategy and vision to corporate objectives to individual objectives that are a direct correlation or subset. Just start there. And a lot of the objectives like we had last year were not very good. They were kind of softball type objectives. But now this year, what we've been able to do is get much deeper into those connections. And we're able to now start asking those questions. How do you directly contribute? We've got a scorecard that we're publishing. And we're also posting every single employee's objectives for the year. And we've got our 5 areas that we're focused on. And you can see how your colleagues in the entire organization will roll up to all 5 of the areas that we're focused on to grow the business, and then we do a monthly update of, okay, how are we tracking? So I think it's start with getting the exercise. I love the athlete analogy of just get in the habit of doing it, and then you can improve it from there and really get your employees engaged around it.
So there's this, I've used a concept of head, heart, hands. When you're doing change stuff, right? You got to tell them what it is. It's a lot of what you've been talking about. You got to tell them what they can do. But it's the why piece, that heart piece, that really, I'm watching you all shake your heads. How often have you found yourself missing the why, right? Jamie, I heard you say, and you can tell them 100 times, right? But so how do you get the why in for them? That's the real connection.
I mean, it's got to be top of mind.
Yeah.
And we all talk about having teams around you that are going to call you on it. We always have somebody calling us on the why. Yeah. It could come from anywhere. It can become a vice president of engineering. Why is he worried about why? He just wants to measure stuff. But so we it's very important for us, and we call each other out on it, on communications.
I think too, really making sure that you're working with your leadership team to take the why down to what matters to those individual employees, because everybody has a different motivation of why they're doing what they're doing. Some people are just showing up to collect a paycheck, and that's okay. Some people are really trying to build something, and they want to see how what you're asking them to do is going to help them get to their end goal. So we're doing a lot of work this year with our frontline managers and our leaders to really make sure they've got that skill set to take kind of these big picture items and break them down to a very individual level.
Yeah, I love how you said you've gone right down to the manager level. So that's kind of, I'm gonna guess that's a key position you figured out that has influence.
Absolutely.
Right. I think that's probably one of those strategies that you can use is find those people that have influence and work with them. Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's critical. I wish I had touched on that, but thanks for bringing that up. Honestly,
well, you can take it now.
No, so
No.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, having the frontline managers, the skill set to explain the why and connect the dots in their language for their folks is a communication gap that if I've done it 10 times, I've done it 40 times. You really have to have those guys have the skill set, because otherwise, all of a sudden it becomes the Jamie story or the John story. It can't be. It's got to be the company story.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it doesn't really work to go down to an employee level and say, because I need to make more money. I mean, that doesn't work, right?
Or we need to improve EBITDA margins. No one really.
Yeah, right.
Really.
Which that's
That
your
doesn't really
board's
resonate.
talking
Yeah,
to you
we're-
about that all
yeah,
the time,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
they're
we're private
measuring
equity.
EBITDA every month, so.
Is that a French word, EBITDA? What is that?
To some, it's the most
Take
the
beautiful
world
word.
we live in, right?
Latin.
One other thing I started doing this year is I created a group called, so it's your leaders, but then it's also who are those employees, not necessarily your highest performing employees, but those that have the loudest voice in the organization. So this fiscal year, I started a group called the Strategy Ambassadors, and basically they are the folks, and they're not all the highest performing employees at our company, but they're the ones that are not afraid to walk into my office and say, you're wrong. I love that. And they're also the employees who really want to try to understand what is this strategy that you're talking about and how does it affect my work. So we've got 11 of them in this group, and I brief them almost every single week on what's going on, both tactically and strategically, and then they take that out into the general employee population. They're there to answer questions. They're also the group that's deciding our employee of the month. And our employee of the year, so they're also the evaluation committee. So there's this empowering way that you can take kind of the loudest people in your organization and get them really involved at a deeper level.
So one of the things that I know that I've experienced myself and then read a ton about is that companies don't fail because they don't have a great strategy, right? Lots of companies have great strategy. It's the execution piece that really differentiates.
Yeah.
So how do you, the term I use is like inspect what you expect, right? How do you, during this change process, what are the things that you focus on or inspect to make sure that it's moving along?
That's the beauty of a balanced scorecard is, you have those measurements, inspecting, one or two levels down to get the, what are the leading indicators?
Yep.
Those are something we spend a lot of time on weekly as an operating leadership team. So the managers that report to the executives, we're on the phone every Friday talking about leading indicators. So that's another one. The softer side of this is checking in with those managers that have to drive a significant amount of change. So the general manager has to turn around a depot, or the regional manager that's got 4 or 5 depots that he or she is leading and driving. Where's your head? What are you seeing? And as they go through that change, there's a couple things. One, you're helping them, coaching them be more successful, but you're also picking up messages from the organization that you then transfer across to prevent any sort of slippage going forward.
Maybe I'm going back to the things that I did wrong in my past again here, but one thing that reminded me of this years ago was we went through this major growth time in our business, and I was meeting with everybody, and we were talking about the plans and talked about we just brought in this round of money and we were going to be able to do this, and then I thought this was this brilliant talk. And this guy, and I said, anybody have any questions? The guy raised his hand. He's like, so does that mean I can get that new tool now? It was a $200 tool, right? I mean, it's just like a completely, and I totally underestimated the idea of, really understanding what's going down at that base level, and then understanding where we're going as a business, and then and connecting those dots in a motivational way for the people that are really doing the work in the business. That's so important, is understanding and listening to what they're doing.
I agree with that. I
You
think
miss it all. It's easy to miss.
Yep, it is. I think, whether it's a balanced scorecard, or ask yourself, once you set your vision, you set your strategy, how do you know it's happening? And if you can't answer that, you have a problem. Ask yourself, how do you know that it's happening at every level of your organization? And you have to figure out a way to be able to measure that. Whether it's a scorecard, whether it's a way that you engage with, the second, third line of managers, or whatever your method is, if you can't answer that as an executive, you know that you have an issue. Your strategy isn't going, the execution part of it will fail if you can't answer that to yourself.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you one final question for all of you and let you answer it. Take about a minute to answer if you would. So, some last thoughts that you'd leave this group with about, why it's important and why you're here on the stage talking about change.
So I would say it's overall, right, it's constant, blah, 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 okay? But at the end of the day, that's your number one job as a leader of the organization or a leader of a department. you have to be thinking about what ifs constantly and reaching out and figuring out if you don't know what could happen if X, Y, or Z occurred, who else could, or is there a book, is there some research I could do? So as leaders, again, you got to be looking around the corner and you got to be preparing your organization. It's kind of, if there's one thing you got to do, it's it. And that falls into strategy, it falls into people and talent management, it falls into core competencies. So,
And I think for me, it's looking out into the future, and I live in the transaction world, so I think everybody has some sort of transaction in their future, whether it's selling the business or merging or whatever it is, retirement. If it's retirement and you need to have a home for this company down the road, it's that preparation that needs to happen from way in advance. We get calls all the time. I want to sell my business this year, and then we go in and start sort of digging in, and then all of a sudden we know, oh crap, we've got a problem, or we've got all of these challenges of not being able to get this done. So it's start early, prepare, and be ready. It'll pay off.
I think, in addition to everything that was said, that I think those are really good points. There's really tactical things that I think a lot of executives forget about or have the tendency to forget about that you have to remember. Seeing around the corner and preparing is critically important, but then it's what are you doing? It's the execution on a daily basis. So how do you really know what's going on in your business? What conversations are you having? When we talk about Minnesota Nice, all that is passive aggressive. It's the nature of Minnesotans not willing to give direct feedback. So get past that. Build a high performance culture, right? That's what it is.
Totally
so build a high performance culture where you're setting what you expect to happen. You're building your employees' skill set, giving them the resources that they need to be successful, and then you're holding people accountable. Last part of that is, and Ann talked about it earlier, and I fundamentally believe in this, trust your executive, your gut, your intuition. So you always want to back things up with data, but as you're looking at where your business is headed, market factors, financial markets, whatever it is that you think is going to impact you down the road, if there's something in your gut that's telling you your business strategy is off, the people you have working for you is off, trust that gut and start digging into it, because chances are you're right. And in leading change, if you can react to that sooner and plan for it sooner, your business will be in much better shape down the road. So,
Excellent. Well, how about a round of applause for our amazing panel?
thank you.